On this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds, we talk about criticism, how to receive it. We also talk about Andrew and how he fell from his ivory tower and the importance of humility. Finally, we talk about the trade-offs of fame and success, how it can benefit or hinder your growth as a creator or game designer. Let's get into it.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Bring your pretty face to my ad.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always, mostly always, by Sean, and definitely not Rick today. On this episode, we're going to talk about two very interrelated elements, handling criticism as well as handling fame and success. I find them to be so interrelated, and you really find, I find that things that you didn't know you had inside you will come out in both of these cases. You might be surprised at what lay dormant underneath in your subconscious when dealing with criticism, as well as dealing with success in its various forms. And so I wanted to dedicate a whole podcast episode to this because I have a lot to say about it. What's up, Sean? Let's start there.
It's like Bilbo Baggins with the ring.
Yeah, it's definitely. I have seen many. I've been surprised at the way that some people deal with criticism. So, like, what are some of the ways? So we're talking about business, crowdfunding, marketing, products and whatnot, and of course we do tons and tons of board games and tabletop games. So, like, what are some of the ways that you have seen others get criticized? Like, what are some of the situations that people get criticized that come to mind?
Was it a board game space? Board game hobby?
Yeah, just whatever is top of mind.
Well, I think the most criticism you probably get is when playtesting, right? People are going to tear apart your baby, your game ideas, and you've got to be pretty used to having that done, which could be uncomfortable because you could have spent a lot of time thinking about or investing in to your game design, or you're trying to capture a certain feel. And then someone comes in with a big black marker and just starts scribbling all over your masterpiece that you think it is. So that's probably the first part where you receive criticism. So I suppose the humility is probably key. Always being receptive to criticism, no matter how it sounds. Which is easier said than done.
Right. Yeah. It's you'd have to be a robot or like an angel. So I find it's not just during prototypes. Like when you have an ugly prototype, it's easy to say, or it's easy to receive criticism. Well, like, this is ugly. It's like, yeah, I bought all my material off Amazon and I use Sharpies. Like, it's not going to be pretty, and it's easy to receive criticism at that point. But when your art is finished and you have paid for all of it and you can't make any changes because you can't afford to make changes to the art, or if you this late into the process, if you're very late into the process and you're like, hey, we need to, or we're getting criticism on our art or whatever, that's just not something that you can change, right? It's not so easy to change at that point. And so it can be a lot harder to receive that feedback. So let's start there. So because I've gone through that of, obviously with Deliverance, but I remember the very first time that I ever got criticism was at Kingdom Con 2018. This was a convention down in San Diego. And so I took with Richard, I took the first prototype of Deliverance with Rick over to Kingdom Con. And I was sitting in an Unpub event, which, years following that, I actually started to take over the Unpub event. And I led that thing for the next couple of years. But I remember one guy sitting down and he played a character that's currently in the game called Shula. And he used an action to deal 2 damage. And he was like, is that it? Is that all I get to do? I was like, yes. And his response, I will never forget. He just said, that sucks. It's like, well, what do you do with that? Like, It's not like he's offering constructive feedback of like, well, you should probably make it deal like 3 or 4 damage, or you should, blah, blah, blah. He's just like, that sucks. It's like, well, I know he's not going to jump on the email list, And I was like, okay. So sometimes you just can't do anything about criticism. It's just someone's opinion. Like, that's what they think. That sucks. Like, would you rather have them say, oh, this is great, and then it actually sucked, and they give you a spam email, and which is a more favorable outcome? Someone telling you that your game sucks and that they would never jump on your email list, or somebody saying, oh yeah, it's great, and then giving you a spam email? Or
what was the most sus email that you received?
I mean, there was this one convention. It was actually it's called Alpha Omega Con that I went to, also in Southern California many years ago. And, like many, as in like 7 years ago. And I remember demoing the game there, and I didn't have any digital format for people to write emails down. And there were it was like half of the people in the room were doctors. And I swear some of them wrote so poorly that they wrote poorly on purpose so that I couldn't get the email. And I remember at the end of the day, I input all the emails into my MailChimp app just on my phone while sitting in my car. And like a third of the emails didn't work. I was just like, this is weird. It's like, I'm pretty sure that's a G. It might be a Q or like a 5 though. So it's, people have various, tricks to kind of get out of, I mean, they don't want to hurt your feelings is what it's all about. Like for a lot of people, there's this, such a thing called a conflict spectrum. And I remember actually another tangent, but it's relevant. I remember when I was going through marriage, like premarital counseling with one of my old church. We were, all the married couples that were there were being taught by one of the pastors, the various things to expect when you get married and whatnot. And they were like, conflict, the level of conflict that somebody can tolerate, or that some people are very comfortable with conflict. And put yourself in a line, like everybody in the room, put yourself in a line on the left side over here, the people who are most comfortable with conflict, and then on the right, the people who are least comfortable with conflict, that like to avoid conflict at all costs, and everybody in between. So whatever spectrum you're in, organize yourselves among the class. So I was very comfortable with conflict, and I don't know why I felt completely comfortable, but I was at the very front of the line. And my
Played too much
brother-in-law,
WoW.
yeah, I guess so. I was pwning noobs all day. So my brother-in-law was right next to me, because he and I, we both do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We both are pretty loud, and we like talking and everything like that. So he and I were right next to each other, and my wife and my future wife at the time and his future wife at the time were on the exact opposite side. They were the last two. And it was so eye-opening for me. Like, oh my goodness, there are people that I'm so close to that I had no idea. Like, I'm marrying this girl, and I had no idea how scared she was of hurting people's feelings and of being in conflict. And so I bring that back to the board game, the convention. There are lots and lots of people that you'll meet, and generally they want to be positive. They don't want to hurt your feelings. Some people, I would wager, or rather I would argue, that they don't relish hurting your feelings, but they don't mind it. They're willing to be bold and brazen and a little rude and that kind of thing. And that's just personalities and whatnot. But for the most part, people, especially when they don't know you very well, keep a tight rein on that. And so that's where the bad emails come from, or the spam emails, or whatever. Or, like I remember, I have a networking group that I'm a part of for the marketing business. And I remember all the people, when I started talking about the game to these people, I actually showed them the game and everything. They were all really excited. But they like, almost all of them, like 50 people, jumped on my email list. And I know that like 48 of these people have never played a board game, and they're doing it to support me, or because they want to make it look like they're supporting me because we're a part of the same networking group, and whatever, right? And there are, every so often, like even still, I'll see somebody that's in the networking group that I'm still a part of, that, they're still a part of and everything, unsubscribe from our email updates because they finally can't take it anymore, just like not saying it's spam, but they're just saying like no reason given for unsubscribing. Right. And it's because, yeah, they want what's good for you, but they're just not going to back this game. They don't understand games at all and whatever. And so, it's in fact, actually, a lot of people maybe that are even listening to this podcast take personal offense at every single email that unsubscribes. And that's why, in some cases, people don't even send emails because they are so concerned that they will offend people. They don't want conflict. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. They're going to, they only want to send emails that they really should send, and they're going to save it and whatnot, which is of course a big mistake. But yeah, so I find it very interesting and very relevant, the amount of conflict that people generally like to avoid, the amount of pain that people like to avoid. I mean, that's like a huge thing. They, people do a lot more instead of to get what they want, like to go through adversity and all of that. I actually find that a lot of what people do in life is just simply to avoid pain. Like, which path has the least amount of pain possible? Even if it's like, for me right now, even if the me of the future is going to be in much more pain, the me of right now wants to avoid pain. And if you want to get anywhere in life, you kind of have to train yourself out of that. As you have to endure pain in the present time to reap reward in the future, right? So I don't know. What do you make of what I just said?
It's just a conversation I had with my son. He was trying to do his schoolwork. He's like, it's so boring. It's like, well, it's kind of like a farmer who has to, plant the seeds, and it's not very fun. It's a lot of work, but there eventually will be a harvest. There's going to be a crop, a yield, a return, and that's going to be fun. So you got to put in the work in now so that you can enjoy the fruits later. So I'm trying to teach that to my son. Yeah, and I, obviously agree with that concept. It's too important to sort of not live by how you feel. It's a path to ruin. One thing I want to come to quickly, and just in terms of dealing with criticism, and really what I suppose we're talking about a little bit about is conflict resolution. Yeah. I've been going through Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's sort of like a timeless classic, and it's been quite interesting. I'm nearly finished it, but this conversation sort of just reminded me of some of the things I've been covering there. And one of the things when he's talking about dealing with criticism is always being sincere and having an appreciation to feedback. So I've got these 3 bullet points listed here of what to do when you're receiving maybe some criticism. So number 1 is don't criticize or complain. Number 2 is give honest appreciation for them raising those criticisms. And 3 says arouse in the other person an ego, want, or desire. So let's go back to your deliverance example where the guy said that this sucks. I think step number 1, don't criticize them. Say, well, what kind of feedback is that? Don't get defensive. And then number 2 would be offer, honest appreciation. Well, I really appreciate you letting your voice known. And then 3, arouse in the other person an ego, want, or desire. To get them on your side. So, okay, look, we both have the same goal here. You want to play great games. I want to make a great game. So what needs to be changed in order to make this a great experience for you? And then that would be the way to kind of go about turning that somewhat negative experience into something positive, is to don't criticize, be appreciative that they're there. And then 3, try and get them on your side by aligning your goals.
Yeah. I think that there's this huge element. I really hope everybody on this podcast hears this, that the mindset that you have when somebody criticizes you, if you're like, this person is attacking me and is attacking my project, and they just want to tear down, then you often will react defensively, or maybe you'll just absorb it like getting punched in the face. Like it's going to hurt, and you might lose some teeth, but you're going to try to smile afterward and turn the other cheek, right? That can be how that mindset interprets criticism. But if you look at criticism as this person is being honest about their experience with you to try to help your project become better, and they're pointing out obvious flaws, and they are, or maybe flaws that you didn't see, and they are genuinely trying to help you, then it's not, getting punched in the face. It's more like somebody swatting a fly, and then hitting you with the fly swatter, and they're actually doing you a favor, although it might hurt a little bit. But I think that a lot of people feel like when you're criticizing the thing, it's actually criticism of you. So when people are criticizing my thing, they're criticizing me personally because I put myself into the thing. I am the artist. I made something of art. Every bit of product that is created has art, someone's artistic input, um, has been, put into that thing, and just left, right, and center. You can, if as that person, you can see, all the fingerprints, of what came from your mind, and to have that criticized, or as I think you said early on in the podcast, to have your baby, to have somebody call your baby ugly, it can be, it can offend you, and if you have that mindset, and this is something you need to avoid with all desperation, is do not be offended when somebody criticizes you. They're not, or rather your product. They're not criticizing you personally. They are criticizing your product, the product that you put before them, as at your request. Like, a lot of people assume that, if you have them play a game that is before its release, that you are, you want their feedback. And actually, that I will say, as I look back, the guy that said that sucks, he was the best feedback that I received for like the first 2 years of development. It was kind of a very private, closed development. We went more public in like 2019, 2020. And, in 2018, that was the very first time I ever had anybody else play it. And what the playtester, he was a playtester, was saying was that this doesn't feel good. And all his job is to identify that there's a problem. It's my job as the designer to figure out how to fix it. What does he mean by that? What caused him to say that, and how should I fix it? One of the things that you can, figure out early on, you can ask questions even before they sit down to playtest. I asked, do you like dungeon crawls? Do you like skirmish type games? Sometimes people are like, I don't like dungeon crawlers. I hate games with dice rolling or whatever. And then a person like that is going to give you feedback that's like, you should take out dice rolling, or this sucks. And then, from what that person shared with you, their feedback comes from a particular place of not liking the type of game you made. So they're not your target audience. And it's as simple as that. Right. But after you make something, in fact, I'll even lead with this. When I was working on Deliverance, I had lots and lots of Christians constantly tell me, oh, you need to change this, you need to change that, because theological implications of the thing that you did are X, Y, and Z. For example, I don't like female angels. I don't like, that you made them look like humans and whatever. That type of thing. It's like, after our art is paid for, after like I've decided this is the direction we're going for a purpose. And people are constantly asking or telling me that I should change like significant things. They have no idea the gravity of what it is they're asking me to do. I still thank them for their feedback. And I say, actually, thank you for your feedback is a very, very important line, because that simply thanking them doesn't mean that I'm going to change, like do the things they said. It doesn't mean that I'm going to make this change. In fact, I remember I had one guy like stood up in the middle of a board game store. I had this status effect, one of the status effects that became cursed. It used to be called blind. And, they were like, how can an angel get blind? How can an angel become blind? And, it was like -1 to your dice rolls. And he was like, he made this big show of like what an angel should do. If the angel was really blind, they shouldn't be able to see anything. And he walked around like a zombie in the store, like almost hitting the walls, like with his hands. It was like, I'm blind, I'm an angel, I'm blind, I can't see anything. It's like he mimicked dropping his sword on the ground and like walking around like a blind idiot. And it was just so funny. But at the end I was like, thanks for your feedback. Let's move on to this. What'd you think about that? Instead of having him belabor the point. I was like, obviously I'm not going to change blind and make it like completely cripple you and make you, sit in a fetal position sucking your thumb, at the table. But I'm gonna try to find what kernel of truth there might be in what he said and consider it. That's the only thing that I promise, right? When I'm receiving feedback like that.
Dude never fought a rogue in his life.
Yeah. Yeah. So but yeah.
Now, another thing
go ahead.
No, you finish your point.
I was going to say, well, after the game is actually made, that's when it can hurt the most. Like when people criticize you for the thing that you actually printed and sent out. Like it's not like you could patch your board game. It's not easy to patch a board game, right?
No, I've learned you never comment on a film at the premiere, because at that point there's nothing they can do. So you just have to say, yeah, I like it or I don't like it at that point, but you can't really offer any feedback because it's premiered now. Another point I think is important when dealing with criticism is not to interrupt people. And that's a huge temptation, especially if they've kind of assumed something wrong. My temptation might be to interject. I think it's really important that when people offer criticism, that they feel like they're being heard and that you're listening to them. And one way you show that you're listening to them is by letting them speak. So that's really important. I think that's not just in offering people offering criticism. I think it's just a general rule in life is allowing people to speak, which can take a bit of self-control, because I have a tendency to interrupt people. I think even on this podcast, I have to be, oh wait, I'm interrupting. Slow down. So it's really important to allow people to express and to speak and to feel like they're being heard. This is going to have a better relationship with people if you just allow them to speak. And I've even found this just in having kind of general conversations with people. You'd be amazed you can have a really good conversation with someone by just shutting up, just letting them speak, and they'll walk away thinking, wow, that was such a great conversation. I really got on with that person. You barely said a word because they just, were rattling on. That's okay sometimes.
Well, people really love to talk about themselves as well as things that they are interested in. And so it does make them like you more. I loved what you said about hearing criticism and letting people speak. There are cases where, every once in a while as a publisher, people will pitch me games, and I haven't yet signed anyone's games, but I'm interested in a few.
It's like me every week.
Yeah.
We got a game idea. It's like, no, this needs angels.
Yeah. So I find that when I'm working with just listening to people's pitch or talking to people about a game, when they start defending their ideas in the middle of my talking, like, oh, I think that it would be nice if we could do this or that. And they're like, oh, well, the reason that I did this was because blah, blah, blah. The reason I put this arbitrary rule in the game that adds half a page to the rule book is because of blah, blah. I don't want people cheating and this and that and whatever. It's like, well, that's fine that you have a reason that you did that. But the fact that they are defending, so what they're saying is, I'm not changing this because I have a good enough reason that I should keep this. And so, if I were to take that game on and I were to include that designer's input in the game, I would probably be fighting them left, right, and center on every change that I made to their baby. And it's caused me to say, I can't work with that person. That's bottom line. I can't work with that person, so I can't take their game. The only way I could take their game is if I actually bought it off of them. I'm like, this is mine now. I'm retheming it to angels or whatever, right? I know it was World War II, but like Michael the Archangel in World War II gear is
epic.
I don't know. But so it definitely has consequences that you may actually not even realize. Defending your ideas will also cause people to shut down and be like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm not offering you any more feedback because I'm an idiot. Of course, you're the designer, you know best. I'm just a layperson that's playing. But then after your game is released, then it's like, I don't like this is what the person will say. I like it or I don't like this, like you said, for like in your discussion of film. And I also think there's one other aspect that's really important, is that you can actually get rewarded for hearing criticism. You can get rewarded for hearing and applying feedback, and in many ways. One of them is that they can see that you actually listened to them, and that will invest them into your project. For those of you that have a crowdfunding campaign coming up, if you share your game, if it's on Tabletop Simulator and you're playing with an individual fan or whatever, and you or at a game store or at a convention, and you're like, that's a really good idea. Tell me more about this, or blah blah. It's like, I'm definitely making a change for that. The person, number one, will feel heard. They'll appreciate just simply you listening. But then so they will not only appreciate you, but they will actually become invested in your project. So they're actually more likely to become a Kickstarter backer at the end of the day, or a game found or whatever. And that is because, and I've had many occasions where somebody that was, kind of on the fence or indifferent or whatever, if I applied their idea, they're an all-in backer immediately. I've had many that find money, that save money, that they're like, I am backing this project because I helped shape this project, and they're invested in it, in its success, because then they can point to something and like, I did that, I was the guy that said, this or that, right? So and I think that it's people love to feel like they're actually a part of something. It's much more than just making a product. With crowdfunding, you're making a product that everybody wants, that everybody in your crowd wants. And so you should listen to your crowd, and you should make it known when you have made changes based on what your crowd has, based on the feedback your crowd's given. So there are other types of, feedback like this. I mean, there are times in the development of Deliverance, for example, that I heard what somebody was saying at the table, and I knew they were right, and all the color drained from my face, and I'm like, I have 4 months of work to do as a result of what this person is saying, because they are so correct. One of the things was we had dice rolls in the game to see if you hit at one point, and the comment was how much downtime there was, and how out of focus, to use recent something that was recently brought to my attention, out of focus can the players can become as a result of attack, using an ability to attack, rolling dice, looking at the dice, trying to remember what the dice meant. I rolled a 5 or I rolled a 6 or a 1 or whatever. What does that mean? And does anybody have a way to affect the dice after I figure out what it means? And what character was that again? And now I have to look at how much damage I deal, and it's just a big mess. And I found that in my particular circumstance, there were too many bits of information that somebody had to look at. So they would look at their character card, the enemy, the battlefield, they'd roll the dice, they'd look at the enemy, they'd figure out what that dice meant, and they would see how much damage they did on their character again if they forgot, apply it to the correct enemy, and now we're finally ready to move on. So, this one bit of feedback was that, I ended up removing all the dice rolling for hit. So if you deal 2 damage, you look at your character card, 2 damage to something adjacent to you. You find the thing that's adjacent to you. It's the demon number 1. You put 2 damage tokens on it, and you're done. It cut the downtime by 5 to 10 minutes per player. And it required an entire revamp of every single card in the entire game. And so I didn't make I didn't get another playtest in for like 4 months, because, it just took a long time. Deliverance is a big game, and it had a lot of updates that needed to be made. And at that time, it was like a nice looking prototype. And it was one of the most important changes that we made to the game. It really kind of positions the game in a unique way. It's like a dungeon crawler that is deterministic, that also has enough randomness that you can't just plan your way. You can't just math your way to victory. So it was, I find taking that feedback, I had to shut up for a good 30 minutes and listen. And it was some of the most difficult. I wanted to defend. I wanted to make it end. It was like agony. I was like being tortured. It was like I was in a mouse in a microwave or something, just getting my blood was boiling at times, and I was sad at other times. And it was like, you know what? I suffered through. I listened. I humbled myself to hear what this person was saying. I wanted them to love the game. And they actually were like, yeah, I'm not really enthusiastic about this because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, that hurt my feelings that they didn't like the game and whatever at the time. And I actually think they love the game now. But but there were some serious changes that needed to be made. And the only way that I was able to finally do that is to absorb that criticism. I just had to,
So
felt like getting stung by a horde of bees.
That brings an interesting point up when receiving criticism, when to accept it, because you mentioned, some people offered feedback saying, they don't like the fact there's female angels, or you received some criticism that you said that was consistent, but you said, I've made my decision. But then there was other times where you did hear, I know one thing that people constantly said to you was that Deliverance needed minis, and to the point you just kind of buckled. Okay, I'm putting minis in the game. So there's obviously there's a point in where you're getting. So obviously it's not necessarily the consistency of that criticism, but there's what's sort of guiding the implementation of said suggestions.
Yeah, the first thing is you have to have a reason, and for many games, there's not a significant need to have a reason for every single element in the game, but for Deliverance there was, because you have a very discerning player base. It's kind of like a Lord of the Rings game, or some other big intellectual property that people know very well. Great example would be like the Lord of the Rings series by Amazon versus the Fallout series by Amazon. Fallout had which I just finished, had a really like a massive amount of respect for the games, and it was an honorable try. Like every single thing that they did right, it just far outstripped everything that they did wrong. Versus Lord of the Rings, the Amazon series was kind of like a generic fantasy, but not Lord of the Rings. Like everybody that's a big Lord of the Rings fan just they didn't like it because it didn't treat the lore base correctly. Well, Deliverance uses a very important lore base that a lot of people understand and read
religiously follow.
Yes, yeah. So it's like one step up, right? And so I had to have a reason for every single thing. Now, people would disagree with those things, but I found that as long as I had a reason that worked for me, like a rationale that I could employ, for example, female angels, they would say, "Oh, female angels aren't in the Bible," and that's generally true. I would agree with that. There are some, one particular verse that you could use to argue for the case, which is like related to like women with the wings of a bird and that kind of thing. But in general, like it's not a very strong argument. And so what I decided was that I wanted the characters in the game to be relatable. And so this is a fantasy game. It's not perfect. I don't actually know what angels look like. And so when they're like, "Oh yeah, the female angels, I have a problem with those." It's like, well, if you want to do biblically accurate angels, how about dudes with eyeballs all over that cause you to bow down and worship them because you're so scared, and just monstrous creatures that are, and some people are like, yeah, that's awesome, but that's not relatable, right? And so I just, sometimes people don't know what they're asking for, but as long as I am well reasoned as to why I wanted to do a thing in a particular way, I'm okay with others disagreeing with me. And I find that they don't provide, or they don't disagree anymore, because the game is actually printed and female angels have been printed, and it's no use giving that feedback anymore, because in their eyes, nothing can be changed, right? So it's done, and that's what it is now, and it's printed. So I don't receive that feedback anymore. Now I just, every once in a while somebody will get mad about one thing or another that is done that way, but that's pretty much like what you said earlier about how people will say I like it or I don't like it at the end, right? And the product has to kind of speak for itself and survive in the market on its own at a certain time. Your baby has to grow up and start walking and feeding itself, get a job eventually.
So the basis by which you receive criticism or don't receive criticism, so there's a combination of the frequency of how much it's coming up. How will it impact the game overall in terms of the experience? And then finally, just do you want to put it in or not? At the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's just like, I'm the designer, I can do what I want.
That's true, and that's totally your prerogative. At the end of the day, the market will tell you if you made the right choice or not, right? But what I always say is this, and actually we have play tested. So Deliverance has been play tested thousands and thousands of times. I would say about 2,000 times before we went to Kickstarter, and by me and others. And I've been a part of at least 1,000 Deliverance games, up until now, and so many things have been tested already. So they're like, hey, what you should do is you should add dice rolls for combat. And then I can say, okay, that makes sense. Why do you feel that way? And I know that I'm not adding dice rolls back. I went through all this horrid work to remove dice rolls for a reason, and I'm not removing them back, or I'm not adding them back. But what that person is saying is not, they're trying to suggest to me a solution, but what they're really saying is that there is a problem I have identified, and this is my idea for how to fix it. And really what I want to do is to figure out, well, what's the root problem that you see? Because the solution they suggest is probably terrible. I would say that very few solutions that have been suggested I have actually implemented, but every single problem is like, oh man, I'm like a bloodhound on the scent of a bad guy or whatever, and I have to figure out the root cause of the problem. So if the problem for that person was actually, oh yeah, it felt like we were able to kind of control the game, I didn't really change what I planned on doing for like the whole game. It was like my plans never were required to change by the game. So I felt like I was just able to kind of see the way to victory from the very beginning. And I wanted to add some randomness in there so that I would, have, so that my plans could be foiled. It's like, now that's something that I can work with. But maybe the dice, I call them like levers, knobs, and buttons that you can press to change things in Deliverance. Like I can make a demon's damage, I can double a demon's damage. And then all of a sudden it's like, maybe when that demon type gets added to the battlefield, you need to switch targets now. You wanted to go this path, but now you have to go that path or whatever. I mean, there are a million ways to adjust the way that the kind of the randomness it comes out. And so it's really up to you to find the root cause of what is causing them to criticize or why they feel a particular way. That's been the most helpful for me. Yeah. And then other times just bask in it. Somebody thinks your thing sucks, just like Ace Ventura when he holds out his arms, and like in Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, I think, and all the birds fly on him, or maybe it's Pet Detective, all the birds fly on. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. All the animals come to him and he sings like that's
Sounds
what
like Snow
you
White.
got to do at sometimes. So I don't know, for older millennials like me, that reference will hit home.
So the next part of our discussion is dealing with fame. So how's that connected or different?
Yeah, so I had a discussion with my wife that was very interesting yesterday, just recalling things that I've been through in my company. And handling both fame and success, there are degrees of fame and degrees of success. Taylor Swift is more famous than whatever other band, you name it. And and obviously she's going to have to deal with different problems than somebody who is, let's just say Gene Hackman, a famous movie star, but not super duper culturally impactful like Taylor Swift is today, right? But then there are people that are board game designers that go to a convention and meet their fans. And for me, like when I go to Origins and I walk through the halls, I'm going to have a hard time getting from point A to point B because I'm going to have a lot of Deliverance fans there. People are going to stop me and say hi and all of that, right? And that's maybe a different type of fame, right? Success is also very, has many different definitions, rather many different degrees. You can be financially successful if you are, maybe financially successful to you is not, super big to someone else. I funded a Kickstarter that did $300,000, and I know that many would be envious of such a number, but I'm looking at campaigns that did a lot more. Distilled did 558,000, and right around the same time as my Kickstarter. Then of course, Galactic Cruise did 800,000 as a first time project and whatnot. So there are definitely different degrees of success. And I think that like handling those things, I think a major topic I'd like to get into is envy. Another one is how people walk, talk, and act when they feel successful. Those things I have some hands-on experience with that I cringe at my behaviors, in the past. But those I feel are kind of our, the places I wanted to go with this part of the discussion. So where do you want to start?
Maybe just in terms of my experience with famous people, and I've always walked away with like a bitter taste in my mouth. Is that my experience with them in sort of face to face was always severely disappointing compared to how people used to present themselves online. I always felt like there's a contradiction, like on the internet, or they're very bombastic, or they're super friendly. But then I met them, they were very kind of rude and kind of standoffish.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've also got to know is that I think the problem with like famous people is that you kind of develop a one-way relationship where you know a lot about them,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know a lot about you. So something that I've tried to become more aware of, because and I went to the UK Games Expo last year, and I met some people, some people listen to our podcast, and I just have to keep in mind like, these people are far more familiar with who I am and the things I've said than I am with them and their project. So they obviously are a lot more familiar with me than I am with them. So I need to be aware of that and not kind of push them aside because this could be someone who knows a great deal about me and things I've said and things I've been interested in. So I want to make sure that I don't give them the wrong impression by, kind of pushing them to the side and saying, well, you're just a random person. I don't really know you.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've become more aware of. But I've always had that sort of, whenever I met famous people, I've never had a positive experience with this. Like, I think the expression says, "Don't meet your heroes," or "Don't meet your whatever that expression is." But I certainly can testify to that. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, people are people. Everyone has flaws. Everyone is probably disappointing in some way. And I think maybe this is the danger of like social media, right? It kind of presents a false reality of people's lifestyles or people's personalities. And then you're like, oh, I know this person. They're always like this. And then you meet them and like, they're nothing like that.
Yeah. One of the things I'll say is that I've come to understand. So I've been able to rub shoulders with famous people, with billionaires, and with, there was one point I was at this, like, it was kind of like a TED talk, and the CEO and founder of UGG was on one side of me, and the CEO and founder of Stone Brewery was on another side of me. And they're both billion-dollar, like multi-billion-dollar companies. And I am, like, we're talking about surfing and whatever. And I want to be like, what's your best business advice for a young scrub like me? And they just wanted to talk about surfing and the, and other things, we'll say. But I think that there's a certain level of well, again, we have degrees of fame, and also for famous people, degrees in which they need to handle such things. Like, for example, if Adam Sandler or, I don't know, Taylor Swift goes to the grocery store, or actually in my hometown, Weird Al Yankovic would go to the grocery store, and he would get stuck after the checkout line. There would be fans that wanted autographs and everything like that. And he's got like cold milk waiting for, like, that's like practically going to be warm by the end of this. And, if he signs everyone's autograph, and they have to defend themselves. They can't just, let that happen every time. Otherwise, grocery trips are going to take 4 hours. And so, there are different levels of like how one has to defend themselves. And I think that even famous people like that you need to have understanding for people that have fame, that it's a burden. It's not a blessing. It's a burden. Fame is a burdened thing. On the back of a person. I think it's actually much better to not be famous and to be able to just go normal places and do normal things. But in addition to that, in addition to like fame, in addition to the delays that can be caused by fame, you have people that have, like myself, I have 7 children. And so when you want to do something with me and you invite me to a thing, I'll likely say, oh yeah, I'll I'd love to make it, and I won't be able to make it. Like I just won't. I won't be able to make it unless it's pre-planned months in advance, like or it's a short thing that I invited you to. I will not be able to make the thing because I have so many responsibilities at home that I have to prioritize that it's just not something that I can usually do. Right. So like I'm invited on a regular basis by some of our church leadership. They're doing like a men's Bible study. It's like, dude, like I know it's just an hour, but that is like a chaotic a massive impact in my week if I have to spend 1 hour driving someplace and coming back. That is massively bigger than you think it is, right? And so part of the I think dealing with I don't want to say fame, because obviously more children doesn't make you more famous, but it definitely limits your availability, limits your mental capability to take on other tasks. I look at it like this, where you're a Lego, like an 8-piece Lego brick, like the standard Lego brick. You only have so many connection points. And after all of those connection points are gone, you've got nothing left. So you can't have unlimited number of friends. You can't have an unlimited number of things that you do. You have a limited amount of time. And if you do more things, you will do those things worse than if you did less things better or more often. And so there comes a certain point, especially as you kind of gain additional responsibilities in adulthood, job, bills, family, business, and other things, right? Like making a product, going to crowdfunding. Now you have to deliver a product, whatever, those types of things, like that will shrink the amount of things that you can do. And so for me, I tend to compartmentalize a lot. There's this really great book. It's called Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti. Where a woman, her thoughts, the premise of the book is basically a woman's thoughts are like spaghetti noodles that all touch each other, that all blend together. And so she can seamlessly transition from one thought to another, while a man is more like the way their brain works is more like waffles, where each thing is compartmentalized in its own compartment. And when it was, again, back to that marriage counseling thing, which is where I first heard of this book. The woman will talk about, just in conversation, have this seamless transition between things. Well, the man jumps hopelessly from like box to box, trying to keep up, and is unable to do so. I think that for me, the thing that helps very much is when I have my deliverance hat on. I'm going to Origins in 20 whatever this year, June 19th to the 23rd. I have my deliverance hat on. I will pour myself out for my deliverance fans. That is who I'm there for. And I will stop and take an hour to get to the bathroom and back, just so that I can talk to my fans. And I will never turn somebody away because I have to use the bathroom. I will ask them to walk with me. That's one tactic you can do. If you're a designer and you are at a convention, you're like, hey, yeah, let's talk. Walk with me.
See you at the urinal next to a fan, just chatting.
Exactly, dude. I'll chat it up. Like, you're not allowed to.
That's a bit too close
chat.
For me.
You can
urinal separation type of dude.
As long as you're doing the same thing, you can continue talking in the bathroom. That's my rule. If you're both at the urinal, you can both talk. But if one of you is washing your hands and the other one's at the urinal, it's very rude to talk. Like, I don't know why that is, but yeah. So I mean, don't high five while you're one urinal away or anything. But yeah. So I think that there are ways to kind of deal with that. So but for me, a big one is compartmentalizing. And also to recognize, some people are introverts, others are extroverts. I'm an extrovert. So if you meet me and you hear my voice on this podcast, and if I sound excited, I'm excited. I will be excited when I meet you. I'm like a puppy in when a child walks in, like I'm just excited to meet you. And I've recognized, like, it's very important for me to pour into people. And that's what I'm here to do. And actually the benefit of being an extrovert is that I gain energy by doing that, rather than maybe I don't know if you're an introvert, but you spend energy when you deal with people, right?
Yeah. You're like a warrior.
Yeah.
Your rage. I wonder how much of this is based off culture as well. it always reminds me of Jay-Z and Beyonce. They came to Dublin, and they famously went to like the central park of Dublin, called Phoenix Park. It's a big park, and they brought like an alarming amount of security. It wasn't needed because no one came up to them. Everyone's like, "Oh, there's Jay-Z, Beyonce. Just leave them alone. Let them do their thing." And I think in America they would have been swarmed by people, but in Ireland it's very much, "Oh, there's some famous people. I don't want to bother them. I'm just gonna keep a distance." So I might be polite and wave, but so maybe some of this is also to do with culture. I mean, I think Americans, from my understanding, might have a greater celebrity culture, and this idea of kind of like storming people is I also think coming back to your idea of fame being a burden. I think it's like all things in life. There's trade-offs, isn't there? It's a burden, but there's also blessing in fame. I think a clear case of this was Kanye West, or Ye, or Yee, whatever he's calling himself now. I think recently at the Super Bowl, he had an ad where he was recorded on his phone.
It was the best ad of the whole Super Bowl. It was
this dodgy ad about him telling people to go to the store and buy merchandise, and he was
saying the Super Bowl ad was so expensive. He's like, we paid like $7 million for this ad, so we don't have any money for the dang commercial. Go to Yeezy.com
and that was his ad.
That's it.
And that only worked because he's famous. So people are like, "Oh yeah, it's Kanye West." Yeah. But it wouldn't work if Andrew Lowen did that, or if I did that or something. So I think there's an element there where fame has its trade-offs. There's burdens, but there's also blessing. It's a lot easier to market thing when you're famous.
Yeah, that's true, and that's why I call it the noble sacrifice of when you put yourself as the face of your company, people can't resonate with corporations. They can say, yes, I love Stonemaier Games, for example, because they do what's right. They make great games that are of a particular flavor that I enjoy, and that kind of thing, or whatever company. But you can't say, but the people that you resonate with, you can say I resonate with Jamie Stegmaier because of whatever. But you can support a person, but you're not really as interested in supporting a corporation because they need money. They want money, right? And so, so I think it is a sacrifice to, make yourself the face of your company that will increase your the time it takes you to get to the restroom at a convention. But it might be necessary for the product, right? So, now, related to success. So these are kind of related, but you can be famous and still poor, right? It's easy. If you make a board game and people love it, then you're poor because board games don't make a whole lot of money, right? There's just a lot of stuff to do in order to have a successful business. And
you're really good at video games, something.
Yeah,
a lot of people might know about you. I'm not making much.
Yep. So, the idea behind success. So there was this story, and I'll share. I had this was back in 2015. I was running Next Level Web, and I had at the time a big. So I just helped a client grow like a fire pit glass business large enough that it was acquired by a very large boulder and stone quarry company. So these were the people that, like, if you need big landscape rocks, they have giant landscape rocks for you. They have all sorts of different kinds of rocks, and they bought this company. And I earned the ability we went from like, $1,500 a month in marketing revenue into our company to $4,500 a month because this other company was like, yeah, we want to use you guys. And it tripled our income. I remember the month was like September 2015. We landed that contract, and I was like, oh, land of milk and honey, this is great, And then we also had a very pretty large bike shop that was it was like triathlons, triathlon bikes, mountain bikes, road bikes. They sold lots and lots of bikes, and they came on, and that was like $2,000 a month. Then I had another client come on, it's $1,500 a month. That was like unrelated. They were in New Jersey, and they were like a telecom type company selling to small businesses, security systems and whatnot. And I had like one or two other clients, and I remember it was like $10,000 a month that we went up in like monthly revenue in that 1 month. And I walked differently, and I talked differently, and I was like,
you got a monocle or a top hat? The
yeah,
cane?
dude, I was like very, very confident and secure in myself. I was like the king of the king under the mountain with his son and his grandson next to him and the Arkenstone above him. You know, he was secure under the mountain, right? And then it was a really strange feeling. I felt confident and walked around thinking like I'm secure. Like I don't care what this one, $300 a month client says. I have means and ability and whatever, and we're doing really, really great. And yeah, there was work, but we had enough staff that like they could do it. And the month of October, like 1 month later, so it was for a really stupid reason, but we were fired from that landscape rock company. And then the bike shop their credit card kept declining. So they were like on for a month, and then like 3 months later we'd get paid again. We kept chasing them for money, and I would have to just forgive debt because they were like maxed out on credit cards, and I don't know how they stayed in business. I think they're still in business to this day, but it's like they just were having major issues paying us. And then there were other clients that also quit. And like at the end of the day, the only client that was consistent was that one from New Jersey that was like $1,500 a month. And that was the client that was the most work by far. And I remember we went up like $10,000. And then the next month we dropped like huge. So, it's not like we were doing super well before that. We were like making just enough to pay everyone's salary, just enough. And we were, sometimes we'd lose a little money, and I'd have to pull out of my home equity line of credit to like make sure the payroll happened. And then this month was like, wow, we got out of our debt. Yay. Can't wait to just be rich. Like $10,000 a month into the company means I can have money now or whatever. And it all just came crashing down on me. I was in my ivory tower, and it just came crashing down like the very next month. And I just felt like it was God showing me what was inside my heart, like why I had confidence when I had more money flowing, perceived to be flowing into the bank account versus having confidence before. And I realized my confidence was totally shaped by what I thought my external financial circumstances were like. And I placed my value in them, or in that. And I didn't have any idea that even existed inside me. I try not to care about money. I'm not like, I don't, try to make a lot of money. I try to think about other people. I try to think about, the company in general, like needs to be healthy and whatnot, but I don't need like a bigger house and a better car and that kind of thing. Like I'm not that type of person. I tend to be really happy with what I've got. I did spend $400 on Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era, but I do like nice things, but those are very compartmentalized. Like I skipped out on Castles of Burgundy, like Special Awakened Realms edition, because it's just a lot of money. And I was like, I just don't want to, I don't want to live like above my means or anything like that. But, so anyway, it was just a thing that showed me like, there's more that's going on. And that was a conversation I had with my wife. Like, remember that when that happened. And so now I make a lot more money now than I did then. Personally for my household, and you have to, when you have 7 children, like you've got to make more money than when you have one.
And more employees.
Yeah, and you're right. We have a staff of 8. We have 8 staffers now, and it just, you need to. But I just find that there's stuff inside you that you might not recognize, and you might be ashamed of. But if you look back and let those times train you, you will adapt, and the next time it happens, you'll be much more humble. I think humility is the key, and really the whole reason that I wanted to add in this portion about handling fame and success. Humble people are able to handle fame and success a lot better than prideful people. And people that think they're humble actually have a lot of pride that needs to be kind of rooted out through experience and whatnot. People that may appear humble might actually be very prideful. And as the people that listen to this podcast, I feel like life experience is the thing that can humble you if you're willing to learn and be trained by it. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. It sort of reminds me of somewhat similar but different. But there was a time when I played a lot of World of Warcraft. At one point, I was the highest ranked hunter on the server. So that brings a lot of pride. It's just, I remember I was shooting my
Strutting around
friend.
with your night elf, like.
Yeah, my friend wasn't, let's say, particularly a tryhard. I was kind of having fun with him in like a duel, and like it was impossible. I knew he would never be able to beat me, and I said that. I was like, "You'll never be able to beat me," because it was a spec. I played the game a lot more, and he said that I was really prideful, and I was like, "Well, yeah, maybe I am." but it just, I don't know. That's probably the similar. Something I didn't notice it. I actually am quite prideful, and there's reason to be. I was at the top, and I knew a lot more about the game than he did, and I could see why he thinks I'm prideful. But I was just kind of stating something objective, like, you'll never be able to beat me because here's all the reasons why you don't have the right abilities, and I have way better gear than you, and whatever. But it's just that kind of reminds me of that. Talking about receiving cool stuff, look what just came in the post my wife just handed me.
Oh snap! Oh snap! Oh snap!
So
the painted minis.
Painting, yeah. So let's open this. If you're watching on YouTube, you have to see what these look like. Let's see. Hopefully they look good. Oh snap! Look at this. Painted. Way better than my paint job. These are cool. Here we go. Painted minis just came. Deliverance.
Yeah, I've got my set too right here.
Oh, cool.
I got my set.
Yeah. I have to admire these in some better lighting.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's awesome. Exciting.
It just came.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. I'm glad you got it.
But yeah, one thing I'll probably have to say as well in terms of money, I always find you also acclimatize to your income. Like I remember looking back in certain parts of my life, it's like, wow, I was really poor back then, but I didn't notice it because you kind of just acclimatize to the income you have.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where things were quite wow, and you just didn't even recognize it. So I think that's another thing about money. He who has silver is not satisfied with silver. You always sort of acclimatize to where you are. So I think learning contentment with what you have and where you are is key, because it's never enough. He who has a fast car wants a faster car. He has the. I noticed with people who already into something like building computers, they always want better computers. It's like, hey, did you just finish building a computer? Or like home renovation, like they finish one thing and it's like they want to do something else. It's like it's never enough, and that's just life,
Right. Yeah, I think that there is something to be said for being satisfied kind of with where you're at. People that become wealthy, it's not because they have a business that racked in a lot of money. It's because they figured out a way to hold on to that money and save it. And I remember there's this a woman that was an estate planning attorney who became a mayor of a local city that I would see every week for like a networking group. And they gave this presentation as a very, very successful estate planning attorney. They said that people that are wealthy have one thing in common. They have a joy of saving money. The joy of saving is something that you will find in people that have little and that have much. But people who save are able to buy things. I remember one time my mom, when I was we'll say a kid, maybe a kidult, early 20s. I was like not married or anything like that. And I was working off my own allowance and summer jobs and other things like that while I was going to school. And I was like, man, I'd really like to buy a PS3. The PlayStation 3 was like just out or whatever. And she was like, you have to really think about buying that PS3, because if you buy it and then you need the money for something else, you will always, in every single case, wish you had the money rather than the stuff. And she said that to me. I bought the PS3 anyway. And I was glad I did, because it ended up being my DVD player all the way up until it finally died in like 2016 or something, like 20 years later or 15 years later. But the concept really stuck with me. It's like, in the end, when you have stuff but you're struggling to pay the bills, would you rather have the stuff or the money? It's always the money. You would much rather have the money. Like if you could go back, like I don't know if you ever fantasize about like I used to go to Starbucks like multiple times a week just because of, in business, I drive around and like Starbucks is the place that has Wi-Fi and all that. And like every time I go into Starbucks, I always grab like a venti white chocolate mocha, and it's like $6 or something. And I thought, man, I probably have paid for like 10,000 of these. I would rather have $60,000 than all of those. I would trade all the coffee that I drank in the last 10 years for $60,000. But that's the reality of what happens when we buy things because we want them. And that kind of circles back to the like, how much pain are you willing to put up with, right? If you're willing to put up with the pain of not having things that you want right now, you can earn and do much greater things later. And I think that at this point, with crowdfunding, it becomes so much about you have to have it with board games in particular. It has to be perceived that your game is finished, almost like with the assets that you show, and maybe it's a 3D model, but you have to have the mini that's done, and that's like $400 to get a miniature sculpted or whatever, and then some more to get a 3D modeler to make it look good, and other things like for lighting and stuff, and the video and the actual prototype and how to play gifts and all of these things. This is expensive now. It's not like it used to be. But what I find, like when like my favorite clients are the people who come in and they're like, we've been working on this game for a long time, and we've saved the money to really make a serious go at this. And I have such admiration for that and for those people, because those people, number one, they're not just going to go to Kickstarter with something that is half baked. They're really thinking through, and they really have a great ideas, and they are they're those types of campaigns are the ones that I just love to be a part of. I love to see those people rewarded for their saving and their the investment they've made and all of that. And so I don't know, something special about that.
Get good at spreadsheets. That's my advice. You want to get serious about saving, you need a spreadsheet.
Yeah, or get somebody who's good at spreadsheets. If like I use spreadsheets because I have to, but not because I love to. And but I'm the between my wife and I'm the one that handles the finances. So it's like neither of us like it, but I'm the one who likes it, or who hates it less. So but yeah, so it's. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that we could go with this discussion of fame and success, and also, of course, handling criticism. Would love to hear from people that are listening. One of the other things I'll mention is that Deliverance recently qualified for 5 Golden Geek Awards on Board Game Geek, and it's one of the things that kind of brought up. We're getting a lot of people excited and other people trolling and other things like that. That we just have a really, really hardcore fan base. And I'm so honored to be nominated for 5 awards. And I mean, we have a chance to actually win something, maybe. I don't know. I mean, we could totally be eliminated. There are a lot of really great competitors, and I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't win any of those awards at all, or, place top 3 or whatever. There are a lot of really good games that had more backers and all of that, more people that own them. But our fans are really excited, and actually nominated us for a bunch of things, and we qualified for 5 categories. And if you guys like Deliverance, I would love it if you guys would vote, and you have a Board Game Geek account and everything like that. But what happens like if we win one of those awards? This is something that, even being nominated is excellent, but like related to pride and handling success and handling fame, this is something that is something we haven't dealt with per se yet. But I've there's this man that was is in the Bible, in the book of Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, right? And this guy basically was the king over the whole known world at the time, and he was able to do whatever he wanted. And there was a time where he looked over all that he had, his kingdom and everything, was like, look what my hands have built. Look what I did. And then God humbled him and made him like basically eat grass for 7 years. And it's like, it was gnarly. But I just thought to myself, like, I don't want to be like that, where I look at and say, look at what I have done, look at what I have earned, look at how great I am, and all of that. Like, the bottom line is that the Deliverance fans are the reason that we've made it this far, and it's not because of me. Like, this is now bigger than me, and to remain humble in the face of one single award that, who knows, maybe it doesn't even make any difference in sales. Maybe it's just a token thing that nobody cares about. It's not the Spiel des Jahres, in Germany, which is clearly proven to, get you lots and lots of sales. It's an award from Board Game Geek, which is meaningful, but the way that we handle this, I think is something that I'm curious about. And if you guys, by the way, if you guys wanted to vote, voting closes May 12th, 2024. So you have, like 2 weeks left, probably to get your votes in. And, I would appreciate it if you vote for Deliverance. We're nominated for like innovative. So let's see, what are our categories? Most innovative game, solo game, thematic game, cooperative game, and our artwork and presentation. So that was pretty awesome to be nominated for all of those. So anyway, any final thoughts you have, Sean, on this one?
No, I think we covered a lot. It was fun.
Excellent. Okay. Well, then Robot Richard, send us on out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.